Okay. Good evening, Shara. Tonight we're going to start from the Mishnah on Chaf Aleph, Chaf Amar Aleph. The Mishnah, there's only one Mishnah. Okay, it's okay, the Mishnah. Actually, Nimchacha HaMegillah Amra Eini Shaisa. If until the Megillah was erased, she says, "I do not want to drink." Megillah Nignazes. The Megillah is buried because it has a Shem Hashem on it. Mispazeres al dashen, and the word and her mincha is her mincha was already put into klisharis. Assuming that it was already put into klisharis, it has kedusha, it cannot be redeemed, and it's mispazeres al dashen, which literally means scattered. Rashi tells us it means nisrafes, it's burned on the dashen. And you cannot use her Megillah. In other words, we're not saying that you're able to pour it out, or you're able to burn it. I'm sorry, to bury it, or you could read it. In other words, this is saying that you do not have an option to use it for another site. If they erase the Megillah and she says I'm tamei, the same thing applies. In other words, even after. So again, the first clause in the Mishnah was until the Megillah was erased, and now we're talking about that the Megillah was already erased. The question is, the water gets poured out because there's nothing to bury here anymore, right? There's no kedusha of the Megillah. There's just you have to pour out the waters. No, you don't have to pour out the waters. You could pour out the waters, so it doesn't have any kedusha in it. Mispazeres. And the mincha, which is kaddish because it was in a klisharis, has to be burned. If the Megillah was erased into the water, and then she says Eini Shaisa, not like the Mishnah said before of Tameyani, but she says I don't want to drink, but she's not moida on her tuma, not on her bia. She's not. She says I was never mizana, but I still don't want to drink. In that case, we force her to drink, and the Gemara described the process. According to Abiyud, before we put like these metal teeth in her mouth and open up her jaw and pour the water in forcefully. Now, if she's guilty, now the idea is when we said on Amabeis, the Testament Amabeis, that Rabbi Kiva holds, and that the reason why we force her to drink is because we assume that she's scared. But over here it says she didn't finish drinking. This is assuming that she's tamei taka. So if she's taka tamei, her face gets swollen. Now about this, and her eyes also get blown up. Marikas may not be swollen. I forgot to touch marikas, but her face gets shallow. Now about this, and her eyes get swollen. They bulge out. She becomes full of gidin. What does that mean? She had gidin before, right? She had veins before she got to the mizbeach, the Beis Hamikdash. So it means that her veins become apparent because her skin gets like see-through, and her gidin become full of blood, and it looks like she's full of veins just because they're full and they're protruding. They say take her out. She should not become tamei. She not become tamei in the azar. She's not going to be matama the azar. The azar cannot become tamei, but she won't become tamei in the azara. It's interesting because the pasuk does say, "Don't be matama my mikdash." Even though I think practically it's not an actual, nothing has to be done to the azara if someone is matama the mizbeach, the azara. If she has a zchus, the waters would wait on her and hang out a little and not come into effect right away. There are different levels, there's different tiers chusim, which we're going to discuss on Chaf Aleph Amar Aleph, not tonight, Bez Hashem, but tomorrow. To the different levels of chusn that she could have that are going to push off this punishment for 1, 2, or 3 years. Ben Azai says that you have to teach your daughter Torah, so she should know that if she drinks, that and she would have a schus to be Torah. Now it's a little bit of an interesting shita because the Masifta brings down that even with the other man, the Amr that we're going to say in a minute that don't agree with this, everyone agrees that you're allowed to teach your daughter halacha of lighting candles, of making bread, of going to the bath, like the things that a woman has to know. Everyone holds you allowed to teach her Torah because now she's supposed to know how to act appropriately. The question is teaching her like deep beside this, like the Amkus Torah that doesn't apply to her necessarily. She doesn't have to understand Shar Habar Mazik. Like she doesn't have to know all the Mazikin in order to have a functional life. Maybe she has to know the basics, but to sit down and give her a shir in Baba Kama is not necessarily important. So exactly what Ben Azai Shita is and how he sees it from here is not so clear to me. But right there, Rabbi Lezer, I'm a call Melamed Bita Torah Lamde Tiflas. If you teach your daughter Torah, then you're teaching her Tiflas because she's going to use this Chachmi Yisera that you're going to give her this limit and this idea of how to catch and how to be a lamdanis, and she could use it for improper things. I'm sure I'm a right to Isha B'Kav Tiflas. The Gemara is going to discuss exactly what the Hemshech has over here, but again, not tonight. I'm sure I'm a right to Isha B'Kav Tiflas b'shtei Metisha Kav and Precious. A woman would rather have a little bit of money in the bank, but have intimacy, or she'd rather have that than a bunch of a big house and a bunch of money in the bank and no intimacy with her husband. Who are you? Rabbi also used to say chassid shaita, a chassid shaita. We're going to discuss all these things that further on. Rasha Aram, the Isha Prusha, Omakas Prushim, Elu Mavali Adam. These four chevra. They bring destruction to the world. So that's not, we're not going to hit that tonight, but Bez Hashem, we're going to go through that. Amr Rav Yehuda, Amr Rav, Zot the Gemara. Amr Rav Yehuda, Amr Shmuel, Mishum Rav Meir, Kashayisi Lama Taira Eitzer Rav Akiva, Yisi Meito, Yisi Mato Kankantum L'Seich Hadin, L'Seich Hadjay. I have put this Kankantum article doesn't teach it, I don't think, so we don't have to know what it means. But they put this some substance into the DI that would make it more, that would leave a bigger ratio on the parchment. It would make it less easy to erase. I did not, and he didn't say anything to me. So again, he was sitting in front of Rabbi Kiva and he was mixing his dye, his ink to write on it, to write Sefer Torah, to write his Safras. And Rabbi Kiva didn't object to that. When I went to Rabbi Shmuel to learn, Amali Bini, what do you do for a living? Amali Bini, have a zohar, be very careful. You have a very gaib you're doing the work, you're doing godly work, you're doing shemaim dika work. You're going to come to destroy the whole world with adding or subtracting one letter. Rashi explains what that means. Rashi says in Yirmiyah, it says Hashem Elikim Emes. And Chas Hashem, if he leaves out the Aleph of Emes, you're left with just Mem Samach, Mem Saf, which says something very, not something that we want to discuss, right? Some crazy statement. And the other way to add a letter, if you write Bereshis Bara Elikim, if you write Bara with a Vav, it sounds like Bereshis is its own entity and it's the one that did the creating. So you see, you could just make a small mistake and your mom is changing the whole structure of the universe. Amarti, I said to him, there's something that I put inside, a special ingredient that I put inside, proprietary information I'm telling you. I put something inside the DI, and therefore it doesn't erase. And we're going to see exactly what the nice tonight it seems a little bit disjointed. Amali, he said to me, he criticized me, he said, could you put kankantum inside of the eye? And the safe and the Megillah of the site has to be erased. A ksav that's able to be erased. So first of all, just to touch, obviously you didn't have a problem with you writing Bereshis Bara Elikim with kankantum. The only issue was writing the parsha of Sotah in the Parsha Sotah in the Torah has to be B'kankantam. I'm going to see where Rabbi Shmuel holds that you could use the part of the Torah that's the Sotah, the Parsha Sotah of the Torah you could use to be Mashka Sotah. It doesn't have to be done the Shema. You can just cut it out of the Sefer Torah and erase it, and you can be Mashka her like that. So if that's the case, then you have to write the Parsha Sotah in the Torah with that Kankantam. That's his problem with it. It's not writing some Sefer Devarim in with Kankantam. Right, the Gemara, I'm sorry. Ooh. But the Micah Amalei, the Micah Hamadalei. What was Rabbi Shmuel's problem, and what was Rabbi Meir answering him? Hochik Amalei. Let me buy Bechaseris Viseris. Let me buy Bechaseris Viseris the Batkana. Not only, you know, Rabbi Shmuel was concerned was don't leave out the letters, right? Don't leave out the Aleph of MS, and don't leave out don't add a vav on Bara. Obviously, there's a lot of other examples of problems, and Stam is that any letter you add into Torah and or take away is going to be a possible Torah. But he said, not only am I careful about that, the Dilma Asiv Yased, Atagi the Dalas, Umachikle, Umashile Reish, even this far-fetched case of I'm writing Echad, and the Torah and a Zvuv comes and claps the end of the Dalet and makes it into a Reish. So to take care of that problem, so that's the exchange between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Shmuel had a problem. He said, make sure you don't have any, make sure you don't leave out any letters or add any letters. And Rabbi Meir said, don't worry, I even have this extra concantum so that you can't have any mistakes, basically. That even if I write it correctly, which again I'm akbar about, but even if I write it correctly, that there shouldn't be any takala, any issue with the zvuv or anything like that. We had the story a little bit differently. Torah Eitzel Rabbi Shmuel. When I was in Rabbi Shmuel, he see Matla Kankantam Masechet Yoy. He didn't say anything because Shabasi Eitzel Rabbi Kiva Asala. He said the we learned on the way that he learned by Rabbi Kiva first. Then Rabbi Kiva didn't say anything, and he went to Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel had a problem with the Kankantam. Over here he said there's two issues: Kasha Shimish, Kasha Asra. Sai, we said that he went to Rabbi Kiva first. The first brisa, the first member said that he went to Rabbi Kiva first and Rabbi Shmuel. And Rabbi Shmuel had a problem with it. And the second brisa said that he went to Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva, and Rabbi Kiva had a problem with it. So you have two steers in the story. Why? Mikara Asa the Kamei did Rabbi Kiva. First he went to Rabbi Kiva. Kivan delay Matzika Kamalibe. Well, he wasn't able to learn by him. Rashi explains that Rabbi Kiva was very teeth, and he would say a halacha hafuch from what halacha is and give a teretz the way that is. In other words, if you said that this is tama, he'd give a whole story why it's tama, even though it was tar, and something that was tar, he said that it was. He made them crazy, and Rabbi Meir didn't know already the halacha, so he couldn't hold klap. This is what it sounds like from Rashi. He couldn't get to the halacha part. He couldn't understand it. He went to Rabbi Shmuel. Also, the Kamei Rabbi Shmuel, V'gama Gemara. He learned all the Rashis. He learned all the star missions. He learned psak halacha. Done. Right? This is mutter. This is asa. This is tar. This is tamei. And then also the Kamei Rabbi Kiva Sava. Now he can understand the pilpul behind it. Now he already knows the halacha. Now he's not going to get confused with Rabbi Kiva. Going back and forth with svaras. So what happened? He went to Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Shmuel, and then back to Rabbi Kiva. So that's why both stories make sense. First he was Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva didn't say anything. Then he went to Rabbi Shmuel, and then we went back to Rabbi Kiva. Ella asra kasha, and then Zaktamar kasha. You have two conflicting stories about what happened with Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Who asked the kankantum and who didn't? Rabbi Yehuda Meir, Lakol Matilin, the Kankantum, the Sechad Yoi, everything you put in Kankantum, Chutz of Pasha Saita, except for the Pasha Saita in the Sefer Torah. Rabbi Yaakov Aimer, Mishom, Mishmai, Chutz me Pasha Saita shall b'mikdash. Rashi says Rashi is a different case. So it's except for the Sefer Torah, not in the Sefer Torah. In the Saita in the Megillah Saita in the Beis Hamikdash. That's the only issue of Kankantum. My Benayu. Now Rashi explains that it's not. We just said my Benayu is very simple. They said what their problems are. He says this whole Sefer Torah minus one parsha. He says everything minus the Megillah of Saita is in the Beis Hamikdash. Amar Yemia. So he's saying what's the sorrow behind it. Amar Yemia. Limchayk la min atayra ikabenayu. To be meichik. To use the parsha of Saita in the Sefer Torah is a machlekes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda in the name of the Meir and Rabbi Yaakov in the name of the Meir. Right? So machlekes in Rabbi Meir between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov what he said. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're allowed to be mashtek the Torah itself, that parsha of Saita to be mashka Saita. But according to Rabbi Yaakov, you can't, and that's why you only have to do the ones that are actually in the Beis Hamikdash, because that's the one that you used to drink, and that's the one that has to be easy to erase. But this is machlekes that we just had in what Rabbi Meir said between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaakov should be the same as another said it Tanan. The Tanya, Ein Megillah Sekasher La'ashkaisa B'Saita Acheres. This her Megillah that we had our Mishnah, right? It's from our Mishnah, but it's there's no machlekes in our Mishnah. But we have another shita. Ein Megillah Sekasher La'ashkaisa B'Saita Acheres. So we have a brisa that has a machlekes whether you could use this Megillah that you wrote for one woman, if whatever happens, she says, "Ein Ishayis," or Baal chickens out, whatever the story is, that if the Megillah is written for her, but she decides not to drink, and we don't want to be mashker, then we could use it for somebody else. Rav Papa says, no, maybe that's not the case. The reason why the Tanakama said over there that you could be mashke a saita with the pasha the Torah elikim the intek l'shum rachel. I'm sorry, over here. The second case is Hasam. The advice that we just brought is Hasam. Ad kan lekam Tanakama Hasam elikim the intek l'shum rachel loyhadim intek l'shum leah. That's why the Tanakama says because you already wrote it for rachel, so it has a specific woman attached to this Megillah, therefore it cannot go to another woman. Maybe he would hold even like Rabbi Yehuda in the original Brisa and Rabbi Yehuda in Rabbi Meir that you could be used the Sefer Torah because it wasn't written for anybody. The Sefer Torah was just written, and you didn't attach it to anybody's name. Now, and so now you can cut it out and use it for whoever you want. But when I write a Sefer Megillah for Rachel, I cannot use it for Leah anymore. Rashi says they're not arguing. He's just saying another tzad of how to show that this machlekes is lav dafka. They're not dafka aligned with each other. In the last brisa, and the brisa we just brought that Rabbi Yoshi says you could use Rachel's Megillah for Leah. Why? That's because you wrote it l'shem saita. It was written for the kalis in it and to be mashka somebody. Avo Torah, the Islamic ksiva, the Torah wasn't written b'chlal for the sugya. It's just written, just stamped to read it and to teach Torah, to give over. But it's not meant to be mashka somebody. It's not meant to give curses to anybody. I think that's the said. It sounds like from the Gemara that it's meant to curse somebody. The Torah is not meant to curse somebody. The Torah is just saying what should be done. When you have to write it, you have to write it in the curses. You have to write these curses. These curses are for this woman. It's meant to curse her. So therefore, it's lav dafka that these two sets of tanam are work together. They could be all over the place. And the one who holds that you can do the Sefer Torah could hold that you can't do. The one holds that you could erase the Sefer Torah. It could be that you can't. Would hold that you cannot erase from Rachel to Leah. And the one who holds that you can't erase from Rachel to Leah maybe holds you could erase from the Sefer Torah. Rabbi Yaakov let's late for Gemara. Now, Rabbi Yoshia clearly holds that it doesn't have to be the Shema. Let's say so the beginning of Kolaget, the first Mishnah, the second case says Kasa the Gash is Isha v'Nimlach. So we're asking from that Mishnah. Kasa the Gash is Isha v'Nimlach. Matzah ben Irav Amar Lai Shmi Kashim 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 Ishtecha. Pasal the Gash, but you cannot. If someone writes a get for his wife, he cannot pass over if his wife they make up, they went to counseling. And he cannot give the get to his friend. It says Ben Ira because you also have to write the name and the city of the person in the get. So that's why it has to be Kashim Matzah Ben Ira. Amri Hassam V'Kasav La Amri. So he answers like it's a bomb kasha, right? He's saying that just like a get has to be the Shema, so too Megillah Saitish has to be the Shema. And it seems there's no machlekes by Isha, by get Isha. Amri Hassam, he's going to answer. He's going to answer Azai. Hassam over there it says a Kasav La. How do we know that a get Isha has to be Lishma? Everyone knows the Kasav La has to be Lishma. The Hasav the Kasav La Amar Rachmana. So for Inan Ksiu Lishma, it has to be the Kasav has to be La. Over here Hacha the Asala, and it says you have to make it for her with Maya Sia Mechika. So Rabbi Yoshia said that you have to be Meichik Lishma. So I could write 100 Megillas for sites, have them stacked up on my desk, and as somebody comes in, I could just take it off. The Mechika has to be on Lishma because it says the Asala Lishma. So he said it's not a problem. It's not a problem for that Gemara in Megillah. That's Kasav Lishma over here is Asala Lishma. Look at the Gemara right there. Ein masekas lishlis ashapana. Right, quoting the Mishnah until her face starts blowing up. Mani. Who's this Mishnah? Who's the member of that Mishnah? Reb Shimon of that clause in the Mishnah, that line. Reb Shimon why? The Amar Makav is a mincha es minchas of acher mashka. We learned already in the previous Mishnah that Reb Shimon says you first do the mincha and then you mashka. in order for her to get hit as soon as she swallows, as soon as she drinks, for the water to take effect on her, the mincha have to already be makriv. How do we know? The comment the loy karva minchas loy batkila. The mincha is integral to the across the board. Everyone holds this. No matter what you hold before or after, it doesn't matter. As soon as you have to do the mincha in order for it to take effect. The question is when that happens. But everyone agrees that it happens after that only after the mincha could she get hit. So there has to be Reb Shimon that for the water to take effect, the second it goes into her body has to be that she already did the mincha before. The now let's look at the second part of the Mishnah, or further later on in the Mishnah. Asim l'Rabbanan comes out to the Rabbanan, right? The fact that there's a schos, why? Because Reb Shimon says there's no schos. The Reb Shimon Amar ein schos taila b'mayim v'mamarim. We already had this. We're going to have it later on. Of Gimel, I think, where he says a bit fairish. Yeah, Reb Shimon Aimer, the first line of the Mishnah, ein schos taila b'mayim v'mamarim. So you see that there's a problem over here, right? The Mishnah, the one part of the Mishnah that says that the water, she starts deteriorating as soon as she drinks. It has to be like Reb Shimon, and the later part says the chos has to be like Rabbanan. There's two Rabbi Kivas. So you remember your Testament Beis, there's Rabbi Kiva Lamala, Rabbi Kiva Lamata. And we said it's Machlekes and Rabbi Kiva. The Rabbi Kiva in the bottom is the one that says that hakrava, that mincha had to be makriv before the shia. So that in that sheet of Rabbi Kiva, in that Tana, with that Tana in Rabbi Kiva, he holds that but he's not beholden to that to hold like Rabbi Shimon by his chus. He can hold like that. There's that according like the Rabbanan that there is a chus talala, and it's like this. So it's all the sheet of Rabbi Kiva. So who's the author of our Mishnah? Rabbi Kiva. So the my time. Why they send him out to Dilma Mesa? The Dilma Mesa, maybe she's going to die. The moment the mace also machan lavia, you're going to say that a mace is not allowed to be in a machan lavia. The tanya tmei mace mutter lechan is the machan lavia. Not only is that tamei mace mutter to be machan lavia, but like tamei mace bavad amru ella afilu mace atzmai, even a mace himself, the body itself. Shenema, how do we know? Vayikach Moshe atzmai Yosef imai. We learned this extensively. The whole sugya of Moshe Rabbeinu taking atzmai Yosef all around the desert, all around the midbar. It says he took him with him. Now we learn out from there. It's still with him the whole time, and we had a Gemara that says that it stood there mamish right next to the Aron HaKadosh, the Aron, because it says this Aron did everything that Aron said. So that's why it's what's it called. It could be that it's interesting how you can bring a right in there. If that's that Gemara says that the reason why Yosef Tzaddik was there, maybe that's why he was next to the Aron. But to be in Machan Levi, he didn't need such a good excuse. No, to be mamash next to Aaron, it's a little bit funny. And that's why you needed that connection. He did everything that the Torah said. But maybe to bring in Machan Levi, I could bring a raya from him anyway. Okay, it could be that's chat. Fine. So then so we're not worried that she's going to die. And right, it's not. We're not worried that she's going to die. Ella, what? Shama, tifas nida. She's going to come and nida. The memra the beast. Right. So that's it. And then Rashi brings down from Sachem that Azav, Mitzayra, Azava, Nida, they all are now allowed to be in Machan Leviyah. Fine. The memra, effectively, to be Susa Merapia. You're saying that a fear literally loosens. In other words, causes a flow, causes to become a nida. And then we're in the chsivet v'tischalchal. And Malcolm Oid, we had this Gemara in Megillah when it was talking about Esther Malka. She got very afraid from the news of Mordechai dressed in sack v'efer, and it said that this Chachali, but there's a few pshat, and one of them is that she became a nida. V'amerav she pierced a nida, she became a nida. That's what this Chachal means. V'ha'anan tanan, we learned that fear is misalekas dam, stops blood flow from a uterus. In other words, stops dam nida. There's two different types of fear. Somebody who's going through an extended period of, pun intended, an extended tkufa of stress and fear, that will cause her cycle to stop. But somebody who gets all of a sudden scared, and like a sudden time, then that would cause a nida. And I think that halacha l'maisa, I think that maybe I don't know if that's part of why that's something else. Okay, fine. Here's fine. That's the Gemara. That's to go back. That's the chash. She's going to become a nida from the pacha of her starting to blow up and the water's taking effect. She's going to become a nida and she's coming in Machan Leviah. Yesh l'zchos ha'isa mani mesnis, and who's our mishnah? So we're going to bring down a brisa that shows three different shittas and none of them seem to stem. Loy Abba Yossi Bechanan v'Loy Rabbi Elazar ben Yitzchak Ish Kfar Daram v'Loy Rabbi Shmuel V'Tanya Im Yesh Lo Zchos Toila Shalish Chadashim Kedei Hakaras Ha'uber. The Tanakhama said Abba Yosef ben Chanan. Abba Yosef ben Chanan says that it's 3 months. 3 months until it's recognizable that she's pregnant. Rabbi Elazar ben Yitzchak Ish Kfar Daram Amar Tisha Chadashim Shnama v'Niksa v'Nizra Zera. She will become Naki and she will have kids. And it says, I think it's Tehillim, somewhere completely completely random, that Zera refers to Zera Yavdenis Yusupar, Zera Haroy L'Sapa. It has to be a full-fledged baby and not 3 months. Rashi brings down that the Tanakhama Abba Yosef ben Yechanan also uses the Joshua, but he uses it he doesn't jump to the pasuk in Tehillim. He just says as long as it's a zera, which means that once she's 3 months, that's already considered zera. Everyone knows she has a baby inside her, and that's where the supposed to tell it. The pasuk literally means v'niksa v'nizra zera, that if she's clean, which means she wasn't boiled this guy, then she will have children. But it's like a little bit of a drush. V'niksa, if she has a schos, then she will be able to have. She'll be extended the time of a child, which again we have machlekes the first two shittas of how long that zman is. Rabbi Shmuel Aimer, Shemas Achaydish 12 months. So let's just stop here for a second because we're going to go into his shita why. But right now you see you have 3 months, 9 months, and 12 months. You don't have anyone that says a year, 2 years, and 3 years. Right? You don't have anyone that says all three. Rabbi Shmuel maxes that at 1 year, but who says 3? Nobody. All right, let's go into Rabbi Shmuel Shita. Now, Rabbi Shmuel, I'm Mishnei Masachaydish. Why? The Afa Pisha Ein Raya L'Dav V'Zeich L'Dav. He doesn't have a Raya Brura, but he has a shtickle smach. This is Daniel talking to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar had a very scary dream. I forgot exactly. I didn't see what it was, but Daniel that he's going to get punished. He's going to have to live with the animals, something like that. And Daniel was going to give him an eitzah on how to avoid these piranhas. He says the Chsiv. Lahen Malka Milki Yishbar Alayach. My words, my advice should be comfortable for you, should be easy for you. You should accept them basically. Your chatam and your avainais will be erased with tzedakah and being gracious to aniyan. It's going to extend your period of tranquility. In other words, it sounds even from his psak that he's not gonna, from his interpretation, that he's not gonna be off the hook lagamri, but that he's going to have an extension on his, but he's gonna get his sentencing pushed off. Right? And it says, this calamity fell on Nebuchadnezzar. It came after 12 months. So you see that a pushed off got to 12 months. Fine, so that's Rabbi Shmuel's smach. Now, I'm thinking more like this. Again, the kasha is, I only have 3 months, 9 months, and 12 months. I don't have 1, 2, and 3 years. So, Rabbi Shmuel, Ashkich Kra, the Amar, V'tani Dechsev, Koi Amar Hashem, Al Shleisher Pishtei Edaim, I'm going to have like 3 Pesham from Edaim. In other words, I'm going to be soivel 3 separate Pesham. Each Pesha is a year. And we know from Nebuchadnezzar that 1 Pesha could be pushed off for a year. So you have 3 extensions, it's 3 years, 1, 2, or 3. So in fact, it sounds like a great raya. Why is he saying why is it only zech? It sounds like a very geshmak raya. He brought good raya in Pesukim. Everything about Dilma Shani because Baruch is not so makro with them, and it sounds like he's letting him off the hook. But it's really because it doesn't rush to punish them in this world. He lets them get hit in this world, in the next world. He's like, enjoy this world, go eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow you're going to die, and then you're going to get patched. Baruch like us, he doesn't want us to suffer in the next world. He wants us to come up clean and reign, so we get clapped a little bit quicker sometimes. So he said maybe it's not a riot, maybe just because the Nebuchadnezzar got pushed off a year, and there's a smach to say that Edom got pushed off 3 sets of years, not 3 years. That's Nebuchadnezzar, yeah. Unless I made a mistake. No, I think it's in B'chanatza. Yeah. So even though it's not, it could be it's lavdavka because us Yiddelach, we get sometimes hit a little bit faster. Gosh to for joining, and Mezashim tomorrow night, same time.